Hello, I'm Dr. Beverly Wright, and welcome to Tag Data Talk. With us today, we have Tamara Lambert, PhD, and we're talking about being human in the AI era. Very interesting topic. So tell us, why are you so cool? Tell us a little bit about your background. I know you have 5 degrees.
Well, I actually have four.
Four. Oh, wow, just four.
Yeah. So my background is in biological engineering.
Mhm.
I got a bachelor's from Cornell University in biological engineering. I got a master's degree in public health from Emory, and another master's well, that one was from global environmental health, and then I got another one in bioengineering from UIUC, and then finally I got a PhD in biomedical engineering from Georgia Tech and Emory.
Georgia Tech and Emory, two places where I serve on boards. I love that. And so where are you today?
So currently I am in Chicago. I'm doing my postdoctoral fellowship.
Excellent. Okay, great. And we're talking about being human in the AI era, and you have obviously a really strong science background. So this is a really interesting topic, given that everybody's talking about AI right now and how it's going to make our lives so much better and do all these things for us and automate everything. But let's talk about what do we when we talk about being human. Is there a path of like what it used to mean to be human, and has that changed now that we have AI, or do we look at it the same way?
I think that's a good question. I think it depends on what perspective you're looking at it from, whether you're looking at it from maybe an evolutionary versus a philosophical versus a religious perspective. I think that back then, or maybe I would say even today, we think about it more of, humans typically, have emotions, have the ability to reason, maybe can develop more complex structures in societies than perhaps animal species. But I think, that definition is definitely going to change as we have AI and
Is
gene
that
editing
right?
technologies coming into play.
Wow. So you think, okay, so let me make sure I'm understanding that first of all, there's dimensions
Yes.
of what it means to be human. You mentioned a couple like biological, psychological, evolutionary. And so just what does it even mean emotionally, those kinds of things. And then secondly, you think that with AI coming into the forefront and being a part of our lives on a regular basis, that it could even change what it means to be human.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that with new AI technologies, well, one of the things that, I've been thinking about is Neuralink. For example, if you have a technology that you place in the brain, will you still have brain privacy? So, for example, would there be a possibility of one, chip in the brain signaling to another chip? So, therefore, would you not even be able to, conceal your thoughts anymore? So I think that once we start really integrating these technologies and we have that ability to, perhaps communicate, chip to chip, will you be able to have that thought privacy that we currently have? And so that's like one perspective in which I'm looking at it from.
Fascinating. So someone, give us an example. So someone that has some kind of paralysis and maybe their body actually works, but the neurons are not firing and not telling the leg to move, as an example. Would that be a chip to chip technology where those chips would talk to each other?
I think I was thinking about it in more like, for example, not necessarily from improving or, let's say, for example, someone who has already experienced injury, but let's say if it's someone who wants to improve upon where they are already. So, for example, if you're a
Oh,
perfectly healthy human being, but you wanted to augment yourself, could you, for example, place a chip into your body that could potentially speed up that processing in your brain so you can perhaps think faster, do things faster. But then at the same time, would you have that trade off of, well, now you have this chip that is potentially reading your thoughts and is connected to the cloud. So then
hmm
do you really have that privacy? And of course, chips and, various devices can signal to each other. So then therefore, would it be possible if one person has a chip, another person has a chip, could you potentially be sharing your thoughts via those chips?
yeah. So if I wanted to get to be a better pickleball player, and I never want to miss a line shot, but if I could just see it coming a little bit faster, then what would that look like? I would have a chip to chip thought on being able to see things faster, being able to react faster.
I I mean, perhaps you could do that. You could use that to augment your abilities, but then at the same time, is there a trade-off to that? And I think that's a place where I'm looking at. Yeah, we can use these technologies to perhaps enhance ourselves above what we can currently do. But then if we do that, are we trading off something else that we also value?
I see. Okay. And to your knowledge, has there been experimentation where these things have been effective but still been able to keep private?
So I don't know if it has gone that far, because personally I haven't, like, although I'm reading in that space, that was not my specific research area.
Hmm.
But I think that these are, concerns that are being brought up. And so I think it's important that as we are developing, we think about, well, if we are going to use these technologies, what could potentially happen in the future and what should we mitigate for while we're developing these technologies?
Yeah. And so there's a potential of like, kind of losing your thoughts because it would be really convenient if somebody could just read my mind sometimes, right? And so
Yeah.
you lose the privacy of your thoughts. Another potential might be that maybe we become more reliant on the chip or the machine to help us make decisions or to do certain things. And once we become reliant, we sort of give up or don't want to worry about doing it ourselves. Is that a possibility too?
Yeah, I think so. So, I mean, going back to what you were saying before, things like Neuralink can be helpful if someone, for example, has paralysis, and I think that's a good, use case of that. But then if we want to go beyond that and say, hey, what if I just want to integrate this technology just to make my life easier? There are a couple of, things that we have to think about. And one of those things would be if someone does not get this, augmentation, can they really compete with a human that does have this
Oh, I
augmentation?
see. Yes. Okay. Okay. And so this is humans that get augmentation by machines. Are there other scenarios where the machines would get augmentation of human material, like organic material of some sort?
I think that's a good question. I've heard of, to have to read into this further, I have heard of energy harvesting. So, as humans, we are generating human via metabolism. And if we have this, energy coming from humans, could humans be used to power machines?
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps machines can, benefit from humans in that way. And of course, we're also producing a lot of data. Can we use all this data that we're producing to produce better machine learning models?
Mm-hmm. Is it possible that over time, like if we exaggerate and keep going and think about several years out and we start getting implementation of this and augmentation of that, and maybe I want to work on this, and next thing you know, I'm like bionic woman. Like, does
Right.
that change? Like, does that change our mind as well, or does that change? Because so far we've been talking about the physical side of it, but what about our thinking and our cognition?
I think that's a good question. I wouldn't say, I'm an expert on mind body connections, but there are some. So I don't know if you've seen this, but there was a commercial that came out
Hmm.
that basically showed a head being removed from a human because, let's say, the human's sick, but, the head is fine. And potentially putting that head on, another body, which could potentially be, a human body or maybe even a robotic body. But then the question is, given that we have our memories not just stored in our mind, but also in our bodies as well, would putting someone's head just on another body suffice? Like, would you have those memories to be able to function normally? And so I think that it's kind of crazy because we're going into this area
Hmm.
where you could essentially become like, have you heard of the term called transhumanism?
Tell me more.
Yeah, so basically, it's the idea that we can become better than human,
I
right?
see.
And so you can do that, via these technologies. And so, like, are we getting into the area where we can perhaps, let's say, evade death almost, or achieve some level of immortality? And so that's really kind of sci-fi.
Yeah.
I don't, as far as I know, I don't think we're there yet, but a lot of people are looking into ways to improve longevity. And so one of those ways in which that was projected wasn't really it wasn't received well yet, but basically there was someone who's like a scientist thinker who proposed that idea as a video. And so the question is, would that even work given that mind body connection? And I would say at this point, I don't think so. But then again, science has pushed the boundaries before. So perhaps with enough work, we could get there.
Well, we never thought we'd be flying, right?
Right,
I mean, that was
exactly.
like a dream, but now we're flying all the time.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of concepts that I feel like as humans we tend to strive for, and we can't reach them. But maybe with machines we could.
Right.
So, as an example, you talked about perfection and youth. Those are two qualities and attributes that we are always wanting to
Right.
go after, and being stronger and better and smarter. So, let's take perfection as a scenario here for a second. If you're looking at artificial intelligence and you're saying, okay, I'm using AI to scan these resumes, something really simple, and I'm going to have it emulate what a human does, except there's a difference. With humans, we expect there to be errors,
Right.
but with machines, we kind of require perfection.
Yeah.
Like we don't want any kind of bias in reviewing the resumes. We don't want any kind of, they got to be perfect, but we want it to be human-like, except the more, 2.0 human, like the new and improved human version of what we would want humans to be, and it's got to be just right. So is it our strive for perfection and excellence? Like, is that what's drawing us to this? Doesn't it kind of seem like just leave it alone?
Yeah, I feel like that's a part of it, but I think another part of it has to do with longevity. I think that,
Mhm.
The human spirit doesn't want to die, right? And so I think that many of the pushes, like when I read these articles of, people who are innovating in this space, a lot of it seems to be like, for example, they might miss their loved one. So they would invent something that, for example, you use this natural language processor and these different forms of AI
Yeah.
to kind of have like recapitulate that person almost, even though if that person's already gone. So, using their pictures, videos, and, voice and
Even
things
their
like that.
smell, their
Yeah,
all
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, I think that in a way we want to basically live almost forever. And so I feel like that push for, wanting that eternal life is what's driving some of these innovations.
Interesting. And how much do you think biology ties into it? Our human flesh, like being able to have skin and flesh and a heartbeat and blood, like does that really even matter?
I feel like okay, so from what I'm seeing, people are looking into various ways, whether it's using flesh, as you mentioned, or maybe not, maybe using a robotic body, maybe just uploading that consciousness to the cloud or something like that. People are even looking into that as well.
Wow.
Honestly, I feel like it's not going to be the same if you don't have flesh. I think that flesh
Mm,
is very much a part of our human experience.
really?
Yes.
Okay. So maybe in ways that we don't even know yet, right? Like there may be things about having flesh that we haven't recognized, that we haven't, and maybe they don't make mathematical sense. Like, well,
Right.
it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't, and perhaps it does. But we don't know that until we don't have it.
Right.
Interesting. Okay. So as far as what it means to be human, how do you think we'll see a shift, like post AI implementation? Once we become more, I mean, because I'm sure the chip in the hand is going to be very soon. I'm sure that there will be
Yes.
tracking devices
Yes.
implemented very soon. I'm sure things are going to happen. Like I'm sure that all this is going to happen in the near future.
Mhm.
How will we define what it means to be human post AI integration?
I think that is a good question, and I can't say I have a great answer. However, what I would say is this: I think that, as you mentioned, there's going to be, there's going to be almost, I don't know, a conflict between human 1.0, who we are right now, and human 2.0, that
Mm,
modified version of, using gene editing, using AI. I think that those boundaries are going to be pushed because there was some, legislation that I was reading actually in Chile that was talking about like how they are trying to protect those who have mutations or alterations to their genome. And
hmm
so this is something that's really being thought about. And so how exactly we will define being human, I don't even know because if you modify, I think one of the things that makes us human is our genetic makeup, right?
Sure.
But if you have someone who has integrated, let's say, synthetic genome
Right.
into their genetics, are they still human?
And is that going to pass on in some way?
Right,
I mean, over
exactly.
time, like, will that somehow get into the babies.
Yeah, like I would say, like especially if you are going to do that to the germ cells or the sperm and the egg, then that's definitely going to be consideration. Like what are
Wow.
we producing,
Right.
right? And so, can we say that if we do those things, would we still be human? I don't know.
Yeah. Wow. These are some pretty interesting questions. So we don't really know how it's going to change, but we feel pretty confident that it's probably going to change
Right.
because we're going to start tampering. And so do you think there's a fear that instead of us being in charge of the little machines throughout our body, that the little machines in our body will be in charge of us?
That is an excellent question. Honestly, I do believe that could be possible. Especially if we are, making these machines to the point where they are, they have better processing than us. Maybe you can say they're even smarter than us. Would it be instead of us using AI is using us,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Interesting.
And so, actually it goes back. So I don't know if you've heard of Ray Kurzweil, but he basically talked about how he expects that nanobots will be in all of our bodies by 2030. And I don't know, about the timeline or anything like that, but I do think that's an interesting question. Like, if we do have nanobots at some point in the future in everyone's body, as you said, it would that have control over us because after all, it knows, it can pick up any information. Like basically, it probably knows more about you than you.
Mm-hmm.
And so at
Mm-hmm.
that point, if something knows more about you than you, is it in control of you?
Yeah. And is it anything I can do AI can do better? Like, are there things that AI really can't do that humans can do? I mean, would you think?
I mean, at this point, I definitely think that, humans are the masters of AI, right? Because we have, simple AI, it's narrow AI, it's not,
Right.
super
Right.
intelligent at this point, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
However, given that, we are, people who love to innovate and we're going to continue to innovate, is there a point where it will outperform us?
Right.
And I think it's a very real possibility. When that's going to happen, I don't know. Maybe, long after we're gone.
500 years.
Yeah,
Right. Who
we don't
knows?
know. But I think if we continue to innovate at some point, we have to get to that point where it's going to be better.
Right. Interesting indeed. What do you think the future holds for us as far as being human and keeping our humanity? Like we've got to strive to keep some level of humanity. Like I feel like love is one of the only
Right.
things in caring and
Yeah.
certain emotions are one of the only things that we sort of hold really, really precious and dear that are a little bit unique. And maybe desire, like wanting. Machines can do things that we tell them to do, but they don't have desire or a wanting to do things like that. Like, how are we going to hold those things? Like, how are we going to build our thresholds? Is it going to require legal intervention and policies and regulation, do you think? Or are we going to be able to control ourselves?
I don't ever think that humans, control themselves per se when it comes to innovation. Actually, I think that, we probably should have come up with policies, before
Before.
we actually, release certain things, and we didn't. But I think in terms of, I think it goes back to that, if you combine humans with machines, does that human combined with a machine have the same ability to love it? Maybe that that person who is also integrated with AI does. But I would say that it's up to each person to choose. Because society's always going to change, and we can't force any individual person. But I think you always have to have those personal boundaries of how far do you want this to go, and then I think that the other thing you have to do, hopefully, is discuss as a society, how far do we want this to go,
Right.
and what are the boundaries that we're going to put around human augmentation.
Right. A priori.
Yeah.
Don't wait until
Right.
after.
Yeah.
So what final piece of advice would you give to people when they're looking at the future of how we define ourselves as human? Would you just recommend that they're cautious, be aware of the risks, or is there some way that you want them to learn more, or what would you recommend?
I think first people have to be aware that this is happening. And, I think many times we just kind of go with the flow and in hindsight think, oh, well, maybe we should have thought about that, right? So I think, actively thinking about and talking about these things is very
Right.
important. And I think like once we really get those conversations going, then we can start deciding, okay, well, what are our boundaries and our limitations that we want to have? And I think, also, I would say, although I did value my education, one thing that I would like to have seen more, which we don't necessarily do, I mean, we have some component there, but I do think that we should talk more about ethics, in the
Yes.
scientific community. Like many times we focus on the development and, we have a lot of great advances, but we never think, okay, well, what about, 10, 20 years down the line? How can we really put some guardrails around so we can, protect and, behave and do things in an ethical manner.
Excellent. So focus on the ethics. Think about what you're doing. Be deliberate.
Yes.
Learn more about it so that you're not blindsided.
Right.
And don't just go with the flow. Like, really consider what you're stepping into.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much to Tamara Lambert for talking to us about being human in the AI era. Cute.